This video is brought to you by Artistworks. Artistworks are part of True5 Studios, and they offer direct access to master musicians through their innovative online learning platform. Partnering with iconic musicians, they've crafted decades of industry experience into guided paths of online lessons. Crucially, there's an option to get personal feedback tailored specific to your playing via their unique video exchange. Get direct guidance towards your playing goals. You can use the code JNC40 to get 40% off of any of Artistworks courses. first came out in 2019, and this is Fender's model of a PV5150, isn't it? When the ToneMaster first came out, my question was, for the price that you pay for these, you could go out and probably buy a used Fender vintage amp, and wouldn't most people rather do that? That was what I was kind of thinking, and when one came up locally, Darren, this is the Fender Super Reverb, which is probably the flagship of the ToneMasters. This came up and it was £699, so used, a decent deal, and this is the 4x10 version. So what is it? Basically, it's their digital modelled version of a Fender Super Reverb. You've got two channels. You've got a normal channel and a vibrato channel like you would on the real thing. You've got a mid knob as well, like you would on the real thing. On the back panel, the kind of only real differences between a ToneMaster and a tube amp are that you've got this XLR output with a cabinet sim, which could be set to off, or 57 or ribbon mic, and I'll show you how that sounds a bit later on, I guess, or maybe even now. And the other thing is that you've got a way to drop the power. So you can have it at the full 45 watts, 22, 12, 5 watt, 1 watt, or 0.5 watts. Basically, because it's a 200 watt amp, they've given you like the 45 watt kind of numeration for that. Something like you'd have on the real Super Reverb is a 45 watt amplifier, so they've just done it to sort of get that. I think the number one headline with these ToneMasters is that they're incredibly lightweight. So the build quality on these is, I think, really high, and I think I'd put these above a Catalyst or a Katana in terms of build quality. They're using like proper Tolex and proper sort of cabinet making sort of technique on these by the look and feel of them, but they come in way lighter. The Catalyst and the Katana, I think, are slightly less traditional, and they might have cheaper Tolex on them. The Catalyst particularly, I've taken it out of the house a couple of times. It did get marked up a fair amount. It also has the kind of lean back legs like you would on a vintage Fender, so that's a nice touch. As I say, lightweight though, so this weighs about 16 kilos, which for a 4x10 combo is incredibly lightweight. I think if you had the real version of this sort of thing, you'd probably be looking at upwards of 30 kilos, maybe even a bit more. So they've used kind of lightweight plywood. I don't know if the speakers are especially lightweight, if they I don't think they're Neo or anything, but they're JBL speakers, so decent speakers, a decent cab, and it sounds pretty huge, I think, when you turn it on, particularly if you turn up the volume. Very loud, it can be very loud. It has that high headroom thing going on that you want from a Fender, like 45 watt or whatever like that. So I'm quite impressed with it, to be honest with you. Now, the only downside that I can really see is that you've got a fairly high price. So 1,100 for one of these new. I think if you look on Facebook Marketplace or you look on eBay, you could probably find vintage examples of Fender amplifiers, so like maybe silver-faced twins and stuff like that. You can find them fairly often between the sort of 600 and 800 pound mark. Now, I don't know that these are going to actually be as reliable as a valve amp long term, right? Because we know that valve amps from the 60s, if they're maintained and, you know, you get tech to look after them, they can still work today. Those are serviceable amps. Who knows what the state will be of these in 10 years even. Typically PCB type amps and the digital sort of stuff is a little bit less repairable, I'd say. And I think typically that's why we end up paying less for something like a Catalyst or a Katana, because the perception and probably the reality is that there's a bunch of stuff in here which is not serviceable. If something goes down, sometimes you might have to replace the whole kind of thing. The reason that some folks might be looking for something like this is because they want something that sounds good, something that's lightweight, and something that they don't need to take a mic out for. So it'd be useful in terms of gigging because it's super lightweight, easy to take to the gig. This weighs about as much as my 1x12, I think. Just take it to the gig. It's going to sound really good. It's not fussy. It's really simple to use because it's got that interface like a normal Fender tube amplifier, you know, which have been backline for years and years and years. Famous users who use something like this: Jimi Hendrix, Robin Ford. There's a bunch of examples. You know, leave your favorite Super Reverb player below if you want. I don't know that it sounds as good as a tube amplifier, but typically if you're actually playing the amp, you're not going to be playing it in an A-B comparison. So I think it definitely sounds good enough that you're going to be happy with it. I'd imagine in most cases it's like you don't plug it in and think, oh, that's sounding whatever. It sounds big, it sounds clean, it sounds really good. The one thing that most digital modeling amplifiers have in their favor is versatility. So while you might not think that any one aspect of it might sound as good as, you know, like if you had a Vox AC15 or something like that, you might not think, well, this Line 6 Catalyst or this Katana sounds as good at that one thing. They do typically tend to be versatile kind of workhorses, right? So like a Boss Katana has a load of different tones in there. A Catalyst has loads of different tones in it. What Fender have done is slightly different, right? You've got a slightly, I think, more premium set of speakers in there, more premium kind of build quality, and then just sort of that one emulation, and you, instead of worrying about doing the whole kitchen sink, you get that one thing sounding good, and then I guess essentially it's going to be a pedal platform. I don't know that that's going to work for everyone, but if you're looking for that Fender clean tone, then I think it's a really good choice. But still, I'm not entirely convinced, unless you were trying to get away from weight and using a microphone, what the benefit of this might be over an actual tube amplifier, aside from being able to work at, you know, quieter volumes. So let me know your thoughts on that in the comments. It seems to me that they've done a really good job of this, but I still do think that at the price kind of £1,100, it's enough in some ways that you'd think, well, why don't I spend that on a tube amplifier? Does that make any sense? Am I entirely wrong? People are gigging these things over in Nashville, I think, and people do dig these. And I think maybe there's also an argument that for certain gigs, you might not want to take your best tube amplifiers. You might want to take something that's a little bit more disposable, a little bit less precious, and a little bit lighter if you've got to use stairs. Let me know your thoughts in the comments. I was using the Ibanez TS10 tube screamer in front of this, no other effects. It seemed to do a good job, I think. I'm going to continue doing some videos with this, maybe try it out alongside the Catalyst and see if they've got comparable tones or if one really does noticeably sound better than the other. I think, yeah, really this is a simple thing. I think that is the thing that's going to attract a lot of people as well. Lightweight, simple, sounds good, bit expensive.